Can you? Yeah, can you hear me? So, welcome today for the session. I'm Neha Arora, founder of Planetable. We make tourism accessible and inclusive for travelers with disabilities. This session is all about tapping into the inclusive tourism market, like you as a hospitality or a tourism business or a stakeholder, how you can also be part of this inclusion journey. Let's first look at some of the statistics. So nearly 15 to 20% of the world population has a disability. And nearly 1 billion people who are over 60, they also have accessibility needs. And out of them, nearly half of them have disabilities. So this is legit data. And when a person with disability travels and they find that the place or the experience suits them, they become loyal customers. They spend, on an average, 30% more money than an average non-disabled traveler. Now, these are the numbers of the establishments that we have that comprise the tourism industry, really. So we have over 100,000 museums globally, 15 million food establishments. We are talking about over 700,000 hotels, which total about 16 million rooms all over the world. And of course, we cannot lose out on the Airbnb, which is 6 million plus listing all over the world. And of course, the innumerable open spaces, public shopping arcades, parks, and other community spaces. When a person or a traveler books travel, 68% of those transactions are now done online. So they're like everyone is going to the internet to book their travels or find information about their travels. And we have over 200,000 travel agencies who are making travel happen across the world, making people globetrot. But we are not meeting the demand when it comes to travelers with disabilities. So there is a huge wide gap for the 15 to 20% of the world population that the needs of whom are not being met. And when you include their families and friends, it comprises to about 25% of the world population, holding $13 trillion of annual disposable income. So that's something that you cannot ignore, really. But who are these people? Let's look into that. So when you think of disability or accessibility, what comes to your mind? What is the picture? The picture that comes to your mind is of a wheelchair. Oh, we are not accessible, we don't have a ramp, or we don't have an accessible toilet. That is the picture that you have in mind. But only 10 to 12% of the disabled population has a mobility impairment or are they wheelchair users. The rest of them have other types of disabilities, and they are not wheelchair users. So if you are looking from an establishment perspective, you are saying, I'm not accessible, I cannot be accessible because I'm at the top of the hill, think again. You are not accessible, sure, for 10 to 12% of the population, but you are still can be accessible for the rest of those people. So it's time that we change these perceptions. And if you look at not all disabilities are visual as well. So you can see from a distance, there's a wheelchair user, a person holding a cane, or they cannot see, they have a service animal with them, or they are an amputee wearing a prosthesis, or a hearing aid for that matter. But majority of the disabilities are not visible. Anyone with an invisible disability look like just anyone out here. And I'm sure when 1 in 6 people have a disability, we have people in this room who have a disability. I have an invisible disability, but you can never perceive that, it's just not visible. So the group that we cover is people with mobility impairment, visual, hearing, cognitive, psychosocial, sensory, rare diseases, people with medical conditions, and hidden disabilities as well, which is your learning disabilities, for that matter, is a hidden disability. Or the cognitive disabilities, people with dementia. How many of you have elderly parents who have struggled with dementia or Alzheimer's? or people with autism, for that matter, or yeah. So like it's a huge, wide, uh, so to say, group of people. Neurodiversity. I mean, it's a talk of the town today, but that is an invisible disability. So, but why, if we look at the reasons, what is the gap and why the industry has not realized the potential of the market, or why they haven't worked into it to look into this business potential? So some of the reasons are, like, there is lack of awareness and training, systematic frameworks and standards, like there is no clarity about like what is accessible and what is not. And even if an establishment has in the past made some changes or invested money into accessibility and inclusion, they haven't gotten the ROI out of it because there was never a market outreach channel for them to tell the consumer, we are accessible, you can come to us. I mean, how many of these establishments actually write on their websites that we are accessible? Even if they have done the work, it's never mentioned. Like most of the five-star hotels, when we talk of India, have 1 or 2 or 3 rooms for wheelchair users, again, being specific, but out of compliance. But none of them are mentioned on the website. And they are just made for the compliance sake. So sometimes they don't even meet the realistic needs of a traveler when they come and stay there or book them. And there are also perceptions and stereotypes which we talked about, like the perception that accessibility is only wheelchair access. And of course, the market size hasn't been realized. Like disability is always linked to charity. It's never been perceived that a disabled consumer could be a luxury traveler, spending 30% more money than a non-disabled person. So this is a high-performance assessment that we did last year at United Nations Vienna, where we brought in together stakeholders from the industry and people with lived experiences from developed countries and developing countries together into one room, talking about, like, even if the developed countries have good laws, still people have bad experiences there. And even when we talk about emerging countries, some of them have good laws and standards, but still people might have a good experience or might not have a good experience at all. So there is a huge wide gap. So what came out as, if you look at the purple dots show the disabled consumers, their inputs, and the green dots show the tourism industry people. And it was assessed on whether do they have a really, the stakeholders have made it a purpose, like accessibility as their purpose and their strength, and what has been their result, has their communication about accessibility information is in place, and the social systems and stereotypes that exist. So what we found was that a stakeholder or a business or a tourism board or a hotel chain is saying, we are doing everything, we are brilliant, we have done everything as per the law, and people are having great experiences when they are visiting us. But when you talk about the disabled consumer, they said, oh, sorry, my needs are not being met. I am not having the experience that you are claiming that I will be having. Because it also matters, like, what kind of establishment and what kind of disability. To give you an example, for a cruise, cruises are considered to be very accessible for wheelchair users. And wheelchair users love them. They make it as a media to travel around the world. But do you know that a lot of cruise companies deny people who are deaf and hearing impaired to come alone on that cruise ship because they cannot take the responsibility of their safety? So they always say, get someone along with you. We cannot take care of you while you are on the ship. So even if they live their life independently, they cannot go to a cruise ship independently. So if one kind of stakeholder can offer very varied experience to the diverse set of travelers that we are looking at. So here are some pictures, if you say so. We are talking about the diversity of travelers and how do they look and not look, for that matter. So here, these are, if you look at, on the left, there is a blind person, And when we are creating an accessible experience for her or people who are visually impaired, we create 3D printed models. Because how would you see, how would a blind person who has never seen or born blind would know what a monument looks like? You cannot go and touch the whole big monument and perceive its shape and texture and sizes. And of course, then there is a wheelchair user with his family traveling. And then on the right, you might see, oh, it's just an old lady. No, that is a lady with dementia. But that, again, is an invisible cognitive disability for that matter. And you need to prepare, like how she doesn't need that wheelchair or that big room to stay. Again, here we are talking about people who are deaf, whose language of communication is sign language, or multi-generational families also form part of this group who need inclusive travel because people who are elderly might have accessibility requirements, or there might be a child who might have autism in that way, same family, and they want to travel together. And of course, now we have the second league of elders who are, after retiring, taking the plunge to travel the world and backpack across the world. Now, if you look at on the left, the guy looks like, you cannot perceive what his disability might be. He's deaf, and he cannot speak anything. He uses sign language, and he uses the latest of technology to communicate and travel around the world. Of course, then you have another wheelchair user and a person with Down syndrome. That is also a disability which is very visible, but then you might be overwhelmed. Oh, what do I do with this person? Because your immediate perception is they won't be able to do things that we think a regular traveler would be. At the back of your mind, this is going on. I don't know what to do with it. That's what you're thinking. And of course, the mixed groups of women travelers. The other day we were talking about women with disabilities who are extra vulnerable, again, because they are double disadvantaged when they're traveling. So of course, there is an extra element of safety being involved with them. And on the left, we see a picture of an inclusive travel group where people with various disabilities, various ethnicities and races, and people without disabilities traveling in one group. So that is what the goal of everyone of us in the industry should be. Can we create inclusion at a level where everyone is included and have the freedom of choice to travel with whomsoever they want, with whenever they want, and wherever they want, for that matter. And the picture on the right are my parents, by the way. So that is the inspiration for me doing what I do. And they both have two different disabilities again. That is why inclusion is important for me. My dad is blind and mother is a wheelchair user. And I've lived with them all my life like that. So if we can function as a family, of course, travel groups can function too, and they can travel too. And look at that I never traveled as a child, and my parents, until a few years ago, never went for a holiday. That is the market gap that we all are talking about, that so many families and individuals never get to see the world, even if they have the resources and means to travel. Again, a few more pictures. You might not perceive that anyone has a disability in any of these pictures, but the couple on top is a blind couple. Both of them are visually impaired. The family on the right, the woman is an amputee. She is using a prosthetic leg. And the mother and son duo on the left, the woman has cognitive disabilities, which are not perceived by, visibly. So this is the journey. A little bit about Planetable. You might be wondering, who is this woman and why is she talking and giving us all of this information and about accessibility and inclusion in travel? So well, this is the journey of Planetable, which started almost a little more than 8 years ago now. And we started off as a travel service provider. I left my corporate job to start Planetable because I wanted to travel with my family and wanted to make other people travel. But what started off as being a service provider soon became into being a destination developer, because there was no information about accessibility of places. The people or the workforce in the industry didn't know how to cater to people with disabilities. And having lived with it, I knew kind of intuitively where things would go wrong, like what language or what body language would actually hamper the whole travel experience of a disabled traveler. So we kind of became a destination developer, going and auditing destinations, creating accessibility, whether temporarily or in a permanent manner by working with the stakeholders and the establishments, training them, training the staff of the hotels, transport providers, and guides that how would they explain things to a blind person, or how would they communicate with a deaf person while they're telling their wonderful stories. And how can they create a better experience for people on wheelchairs? How do you identify the accessible route across places? And now we are also evolved into a consultant. We are helping other businesses to become accessible and inclusive by design. So any business, you could be a hotel, tourism board, museum, or any other travel company as well. We help them become accessible, because the goal is it has to be mainstream. You don't need separate travel companies for disabled people in the first place. Everyone and anyone should be doing it, because a disabled traveler also needs the freedom of choice. Like, how do I want to travel, and where, and with whom, and which company I should choose to? If one company is globally known for great experiences, why I am being excluded as a disabled person from that? So we are trying to do that. Also, we are building a global standard for accessibility for the tourism industry, which we will open source, so we won't make money out of it. The stakeholder consultation at United Nations that I just mentioned about was the first step to build that standard. And of course, once we have had enough experiences, enough destinations, and enough establishments which are accessible and inclusive, there will be one platform where all of this information would be readily available for a disabled traveler all across the world to help them make an informed decision about their holiday. Or just a coffee in the city they live in, or a date dinner if they want to go out one evening. As simple as that. Like, why travel has to be about long distance travel. Some of the good reviews. So this I showed not to tell about how good we are, but anyone and everyone as a tourism business can have that. It's not that difficult. It's no rocket science. If you're creating products and services for travelers, why not create these 5-star experiences and products for disabled travelers too? So what does an accessible travel experience really looks like? Like, if we look at it, whether it could be a museum, hotel, or a restaurant for that matter. What do they have to do to become accessible and inclusive to a visitor with disability? So the starting point is you should first know how accessible you are at the moment and where you have to go. I mean, you have to have a goal first. But before that, you need to have trained and sensitized professionals working in that establishment. Because if you are not empathetic, if your mind is still impacted by your prejudices or your perspectives and conditioning all over, then it's very difficult to get over them, because it will inadvertently show in your communication and in your service to a disabled guest. So it's important you get over those prejudices and get your staff and professionals trained into how to cater to a guest with disability. Then accessible communication. So when we talk of accessible communication, what is that? You might be thinking, oh, I'm accessible. You can reach out to me anytime. But here, look at that. Can a deaf person reach out to you and pick up a phone and give you a call? No, they cannot. And if they write an email to you or send you a text, like, a lot of them are not as educated in terms of, like, their written language can be a little different. Would you be able to grasp the information in a proper manner? Or your body language communication, for that matter. Like, if you meet a blind person, for that matter, and you put your hand forward for a shake hand, they can't see you. So they will not put their hand forward to shake your hand. And then you might think, oh, maybe they're not interested in talking to me because that's why they didn't shake hand. But this is, they never saw your hand in the first place. And we don't realize, if we have never met a blind person, that the reason for not shaking hand was just because they could never see it. So that is why accessible communication is really important. Then assistive technology integration. So when we talk about accessibility for a blind person, what comes to your mind? Braille, right? That's all we all know, Braille. But do you know that less than 10% of people globally know Braille or practice it on a daily basis? Because technology has taken leaps. We have assistive technologies which are so mainstream that everyone is using it every day in midst of us. Like, you have an iPhone, right? Do you know that iPhone is out of the box accessible for people with various types of disabilities? They really don't have to buy another hardware extension or install a third-party software to actually use it. It's just a setting. And that is where, and they can use all of those mainstream apps, which you use. But of course, those apps and platforms should be accessible too. They have to be designed in a way that they are digitally accessible. And if you are starting something new, like your website or your mobile app for that matter, just make sure it's accessible by design. It doesn't cost extra if you're doing it right from the start. You just have to follow some simple guidelines. So that is what we are talking about when it comes to assistive technology. Like, this hotel, for that matter, is a very complicated, spread out hotel, right? So if we use an indoor navigation technology for a blind person to move around independently, that will help anyone who is not blind also to find where to go and when and how. So that is when assistive technology is mainstream. Giving a few examples which you use every day. Your keyboard in your laptop, which you use every day, is a successor to the typewriter. And typewriter was invented for the blind by two friends in the late 1800s when they wanted to write letters to each other. We cannot imagine a life without that keyboard today. Your texting, we all use texting today. We cannot do without it. That was invented for deaf people for communication. Alexa, Google Home, that technology was invented for people with severe mobility impairment to control their environment. We all use it today. So that is what happens when you design for the most disadvantaged a technology which is accessible. It creates a better experience for everyone. And of course, human accessibility that we are talking about, which is a big plus for a country like India and all emerging countries. So when we talk about human accessibility, the human factor, like how that person is reachable easily by a traveler, are they empathetic, and can they think it on their toes to create a solution for me even if they don't know the solution? This is not possible in a developed country, really, because they will need the safety approvals, they will need all the legal safety to be ensured first before making any changes. But in a country, which is in an emerging country, you can do it in a few minutes, like half an hour, for that matter. And information in accessible formats, like you create brochures, online brochures, like very few people have printed brochures today, but the PDFs, are they accessible? Yes, PDFs can be made accessible for people who need them. So as simple as that, is that PDF accessible? Is your social media accessible? Are you writing alt text to the pictures that you're posting? Or are you using captions on the videos with voiceovers? Or is there an audio description to the fancy travel video that you created? If at that point the travel content is not accessible, if the information is not available at all the touch points of the traveler, how would they find you in the first place? How would they book you in the first place? How would they give their business and money to you in the first place if the information is not accessible? So this is what a customer journey looks like. This is the first way. When they think of, when they think of traveling, oh, I want to go for a holiday. Now, I go online and do some search. What do I find? Like, as per my needs, do I find any information which matches my needs? Do I find a destination that has information about accessibility at all? Like, can I choose and customize my travel plan as per my accessibility need? Like, all of us have been to the OTA's websites or other travel booking websites or any travel websites for that matter that give us a channel to reach out to them. But is it accessible to them? Can I choose and customize according to my need? And can I change the items according to my accessibility needs and add it to the cart and go and book it? Is that really possible for a disabled traveler? Like if the experience being offered matching the accessibility need. This is when they are traveling, the experience. So, okay, you get over the hurdle of booking in the first place. Then you go ahead and you find someone to help you with it, to travel your plan, customize it, confirm the details, and book it. And then when you travel, is there the company who is catering to you, are they allocating the right resources for you, who are ready to welcome you or to offer you an inclusive travel experience? And once the experience is delivered, is there a proper channel of feedback for them to give, oh, this was right, this was amazing, but this was not right. Can you improve it for your next trip? Because if they have had a good experience, and even if some things were a slip, they will still come back to you if you are open to the feedback and making these changes for the next time. Now, coming to the language, which is a very important aspect, we have heard of a lot of words around, like people with disabilities, disabled people. We have heard of people with determination. We have heard of differently able. We have heard of people with special needs. We have heard of specially abled. In India, Divyang is very popular. Of course, so these are like some of them, except disabled people and persons with disabilities, all of them are really euphemisms, where you are using them to kind of modify their lived experience of disability. You don't like the word disability because it's negative. No, disability is not a negative word. There are two types how we use the language. And I take this platform as an opportunity, as the first step to educate you on that. One is the first language, which is person with disability, or people with disability, or person who is blind, or person with autism. So it's always the person first who happens to have a disability. Then, second is the identity first language, which is disabled person, disabled people, a blind person, an autistic person, or a deaf person. So we are using the identity of disability first here. These are the only two ways, even suggested by the UN, to follow when you are communicating or referring to persons with disabilities. But here is a small disclaimer here. If a person with disability says, call me Divyang, or call me differently abled, we don't argue with that. It's their choice what they want to be called. But a non-disabled person should not be arguing what terminology to be used. They have no right. So, yeah, that is what we are talking about. And it's not just when we are using in our speech, body language is equally important. So if you are talking to a deaf person and they are accompanied by an interpreter, you don't look at the interpreter, you look at the deaf person, because that is your communication happening. If you are talking to a blind person, you explain them who you are. Do not play with them. Oh, guess who I am because you can't see who I am, kind of thing. So, or if there is a person in a wheelchair, also we don't use wheelchair bound, which is very common. We use wheelchair user or a person in a wheelchair. So never, ever put your weight or take a support of their wheelchair, ever. And if you are talking to them for more than 5 minutes, lean down at their eye level if you're talking to them. Just a few of the things I could cover in this session. So this is an ideal version of inclusive travel, what it looks like. It has to be seamless, it has to be adaptive, and it has to deliver a quality experience. It has to be customer-centric, not focusing on compliance. The customer has to always be at the center. And if a person with disability says, I think I would like to do that, you just discuss with them if you don't know already what to do and ask them, okay, how can I make it happen? Based on the resources and knowledge you have. And if you don't know, reach out to an expert and all the contacts you have to learn to make it a great experience for them. Always use real-time data points about accessibility, of course, because what happens is you might know, oh, this hotel has an accessible room. It's a certified 5-star hotel, but they might be having they have an accessible room. You book it, and then a person goes in there, and then they see there is a wall in the shower area, and the wheelchair cannot go inside into the shower area, which is very, very common than you think. This is the most common error that you see in accessible rooms. And then they cannot take a shower. And it was a certified accessible room, for that matter. They'll say, we'll manage. But then that's not how it works. Your plug points are not close to the bed. These are simple, common sense stuff. You just think, like, how can I make their stay comfortable as a non-disabled person? You just have to think that way. Or guide a blind person if they're checking into the hotel that what is where once when they are checking in, so that they know what is where. They might not need your help later on. And of course, when we talk about the pricing, it is expensive for a disabled traveler to travel anywhere across the world. It is super expensive. But what can actually make it equitable is when we all do it. Because then economies of scale come in, and there is competition, then there is quality of service delivery, then there is equitable pricing. Why a disabled person should be paying more just because they have a disability? So that equity has to exist in pricing and quality of service, in the experience and their freedom of choices when they're traveling. And of course, tailored to the accessibility needs. If you know about it, for one wheelchair user, it might work. For other wheelchair user, it might not work. Every disability is a spectrum. So always be mindful and aware of that every person with disability is different and unique, and their accessibility needs, independence level, and the way they experience the world is also diverse, as much as they are. Why a big opportunity for Indian hospitality businesses, especially? I'm talking about Indian hospitality businesses because all of us here are promoting India, I'm assuming. So the mystics of the 70s and 60s who came here in their 20s, now they want to come back. When they're retired and they have a lot of money, but they are either very old or they have a disability and have accessibility needs. So you need to provide them a channel that they can visit India again. The Indian diaspora, which is the biggest and the richest diaspora in the world. And they're multi-generational families. They all want to visit India back, either for pilgrimage or to visit family or just to have a fun holiday back to their roots. India is, I would say, pretty good in responsible tourism globally if you compare it to other developed nations in terms of various things. Make accessibility a part of responsible tourism. It's not something that is different or out of it. Being accessible is being responsible and sustainable. You cannot build a future which is sustainable without including accessibility as part of it. And a big factor is there is a much larger spectrum of disabilities recognized globally than what is in India. So if you go by the law of India, there is hardly 2021 disabilities recognized, and this is what the hotels or museums or tourism boards are trying to implement. But the spectrum of disabilities across the world is much larger. The ones that I mentioned before, it could be visible or invisible. So you have an opportunity to actually cater to that market, and it's not that complicated, saying it again. Where can you start? First, evaluate where you are, what you already have in terms of accessibility and inclusion. You might be doing something really good already without even knowing that it actually leads to accessibility. Once you have done your evaluation, you will know where are the gaps. And once you know the gaps, build a roadmap with an expert. Like what would be my inclusion and accessibility journey would be like for the next few years and onward, because it's not a project that you do once and it's over. You will have to keep on evolving with the changing needs. Like now after COVID, we have long COVID as a condition many of us have. So that is a disability, by the way. In India, we don't talk about it as a disability, but it's a long COVID is a disability globally. So you can cater to those segments as well. So build a roadmap and then allocate resources for it that have a stepwise approach that in this timeline, I will do that. In this timeline, I will do that. Because you cannot do everything in one go. Totally agree. You need a lot of financial resources, time, and effort to do that. And while running the businesses, we cannot do it. So you need to have a stepwise approach and a roadmap which you implement across the time. And of course, holistic plan around accessibility. Don't think, let me do wheelchair accessibility first, and then I'll come to the blind, then I'll come to the deaf people, then I'll come to people with invisible disabilities. Build a holistic plan because there is always intersectionality involved. A lot of you are already doing LGBTQ travel. Do you know the intersection of disability and LGBTQ+? 30%. So 15% of the global population has a disability, but 30% of LGBTQ+ have a disability. It's double. So if you're doing that, you are leaving out those 30% of that group too. And of course, if you build a holistic plan, one accessibility feature helps not only one disability, it might work for other disability too. So that is why a holistic roadmap is important across your built environment, across communication, across information, and across human accessibility. How can we help you? If you need our help, we can help you build your policy and roadmap. We can help you audit your establishments, your existing products and services, and evaluate where you are and give you recommendations on what all you can do. We can come as a consultant to you, whether it's for your products or services or implementing accessibility. If you want to design inclusive products and services, we are happy to help. A large part of our work is training. So how to implement accessibility as an establishment, as a service provider, or as an individual stakeholder in the industry. Like proper training across, so for example, for this hotel, at every touch point, which is visible and invisible. Like invisible touch point is housekeeping. You never meet them, but they actually make a lot of difference to the guest stay. So everyone in this hotel will need training on inclusion and how to cater to a guest with disability and their needs. We have certification, which you can, once you have done the work, and once you have got audited, we have implemented now, so you can get certified on accessibility. It's a global certification. Implementation and market outreach. So all of this work is of no use until and unless you get your return of investment out of it by reaching to the right market. So we help you do that. Over the years, we have a large global network and people with disabilities whom we are connected with. We can help you reach out to them, and you can do business with them directly. Any questions? Yes.
So you mentioned that a lot of websites for various travel companies don't have any page related to accessibility. And I'm just thinking, you and I had a conversation about pools earlier, and I am thinking about how a lot of hotels, for example, talk about their pool amenities. On a pool page, for example, if they have access to, if they have a lift or kind of accommodations that help people with disabilities, should that be listed on the pool page as well as a separate page related to accessibility? I'm just wondering, when it comes to the inclusivity part, how do you should there be inclusive language and information throughout the website in addition to that other page, specifically speaking to accessibility needs? So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the communication part, specifically as it comes to websites, because that's how so many companies are marketing their services and products.
So like you said, it has to be by design accessible, the website in the first place, like digital accessibility. Now when we talk about information and the inclusive language, yes, it has to be across the website, and there has to be a dedicated accessibility page about what all accessibility features the company or an establishment offers. But if you look at, for example, for a hotel, you go to a booking website and you see the category of hotels. So the accessible room should be there in that category of rooms as well. So not only on the a separate page of accessibility, there you can have information about accessibility in the restaurant, the pool, and stuff. But you have to have this information on the room booking page as well, because that is a category of room. And sometimes, like I've seen a handful of hotels having accessible rooms in 2 or 3 categories, but then it's never mentioned. So you have to call them to ask whether you're accessible, what features do you have, and sometimes, often they fail miserably at that, by the way, even in making those accessible rooms. So yeah, does that answer your question? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And you should have an accessibility statement also on the website in the footer. Yeah.
So first of all, sorry because I came late to your presentation. I couldn't see the time was flying. I'm very much interested in your presentation actually because I'm in touch with an NGO based in Varanasi, nearby, in Madhopur. The name is Kiran. I don't know if you've heard of that, Kiran Village. So they are, they have between 300 and 400 children there, and almost half of them are differently able. So I'm also in touch with them. I go regularly to visit them. And I got to know about Lemon Tree hotels in India. So they have about around 80 hotels all over India. And they employ people with autism, with different kind of disabilities. And I feel this is absolutely amazing to see how they are they are inclusive. So I met also Mrs. Aradhana Das. I don't know if you know her. Lal, sorry, not Das, Lal, you're right. And I was wondering if you are also somehow a bridge between those NGOs who are, I mean, accompanying children with disabilities, and once they can find a job, if you can help them to find jobs somewhere, if you are in touch with different hotels all over India?
I mean, there are multi-faces to your question, so let me come to each one by one. So, in terms of how we support people with disabilities, like through NGOs and stuff, so we have a non-profit, Planetable India Foundation, through which we like do gift a tour for them. Like because people who cannot afford to travel should not be deprived of traveling just because they don't have the financial means. So that is what we do. But also coming to the Lemon Tree model. It's a brilliant model, and they have done it really well over the years in terms of hiring and training persons with disabilities. But they still have one room. And that too often. No, you know what I mean. So the thing is, like, we do not help in employment and placement because there are a lot of organizations who work in employment, training, skill development, and they are doing a good job. But yes, specifically for hospitality, we would like to do that in the future. It's on the roadmap of ours, but currently we don't have it's still a little bit on the future roadmap for us. We don't have the resources, or we'd want to first make the businesses realize that how big a market is. Then only we want to go there so that they employ people and integrate them in the workforce. So we know a lot of hotels who do that in some manner or the other, but it's still not mainstream. The whole idea, it has to be mainstream. So that would take some time. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
A very simple question. We've had inquiries previously with people with disabilities, taking up some of our products, but it's always fallen down at the travel insurance level. So that, to me, or in our experience, is the biggest impediment, because every company that we approached immediately pretty much drop you as a hot potato, and they'll also list all the pre-existing conditions. So without travel insurance, you can't do anything.
Yes, I totally agree with you, but there are, so I'm assuming these are people in developed countries who are wanting to travel, having to have the travel insurance to India. So there is, like, it depends upon the country that who is the service provider of insurance, but we have had travelers from all over the world who have come to India with us across the past 8 years. We have people from, whether you say Australia, UK, European countries, Jamaica, Togo as well. So I think it's, sometimes it's good to ask them locally instead of you taking the lead, or if you do it on their behalf, it's good to connect to the local pre-traveled disabled people there in that country who have taken travel insurance. So that would help, because all of the people who have traveled with us have been able to get insurance. And we have had people from very severe disabilities travel. So I think it's, I can use my network. If you let me know the countries, I can let you know what travel insurance providers are there in that countries. So happy to do that. Okay. I've been asked there's limited time.
Okay, so quick one. Okay, just a couple of observations. So like you said, if anybody wants to get into this business, it's a game plan. It's a, proper process you would have to follow, not only to equip your own staff, but also to identify the hotels which are equipped to handle, this traffic. So like when we got into LGBT community, for example, we got in touch with tour operators in other countries who are specializing in that market. So it was easier for us to approach them. So are there tour operators who only cater to differently abled people? So once we are equipped, we can actually get in touch with them. You see, for large organizations, end of the day, it's ROI. On humanitarian grounds, I would personally love to handle this kind of a business, but every time you make a new investment, there has to be a profitability or the bottom line at the end of it. So one way to source this kind of business, once you are equipped, you don't want to get into any business which you cannot handle properly. So once you are equipped, once you have the trained staff, once you have trained guides, once you have the hotels that you can promote, which have dedicated rooms, then are there tour operators, as I asked, which one can get in touch with? And secondly, when you are into, say, wildlife business or soft adventure business, are there lodges or are we equipped to handle safaris for these kind of people who would be able to enjoy nature as much as a regular person would? So culture tourism is one part of it. You have shown monuments which they can hold and they can feel how the building looks like. How do you go about offering wildlife tourism to people who are interested in coming to your country to see the nature and flora and fauna? So, just a last question.
I'm assuming your destination is India only? Yeah. Yeah. So, answering your question, so yes, there are companies across the world who specialize in disabled travel, but they are single disability focused again. Like you'll find one company for wheelchair users, one for blind, like that. So they are themselves segregated. They're doing a good job, but you have to look from a holistic inclusion perspective. Because I think you came in a little later, no? Okay. So then I did mention that, again, accessibility is not just wheelchair access, right? So dedicated rooms is not always a requirement for a disabled traveler. So that's one point it's important to mention. Now, creating experiences for people with various disabilities, for that matter, of course it's possible. Like, even wheelchair users can go camping. We do rafting and skiing in India for disabled travelers. So it's not that you can't do it. You have to just design it in a way it is safe and it creates an inclusive experience, not like, oh, this is a very large rapid, just go down the raft. You don't do this. And then you get back again the raft, and then you do it. So, of course, a lot of times, for example, the bungee jumping guy had for years a lot of conversation with them. They have never agreed because they're just freaked out. And I didn't even ask for mobility impairment. Blind and deaf. I mean, the statement they gave was they have to be mentally and physically fit. I'm like, how a blind and deaf person is not mentally and physically fit? So it's here the prejudice comes in. So the first step is to get over your own prejudice around what a disabled person can do and cannot do. There is a very wonderful video that was released a few days ago on World Down Syndrome Day. You should do it, watch it actually. It talks about, you say, I cannot have a margarita. So I don't have a margarita. And at the end of the day, because it's perceived, oh, disabled people, why do they want to drink? And towards the end, it goes into, I can have a margarita because you believe I can have a margarita. So it's all about what you believe about me. It's all I can do or cannot do. So it's a wonderful video. I mean, everyone here should watch it. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
We know what we can do or cannot do. Above all, do we need to have a confirmation from others?
They have to cater to yours, like
Wait a minute.
service provider. So that's why the mindset change of the industry is important.
Yes, I mean, flexibility should be there, but at the same time, if you are, it's about we should be able to say for oneself. If you are on a wheelchair and you want to go for rafting, so you cannot ask the whole industry to adapt to, but if you feel that with what is existing, I mean, you can manage, you can cope with it, so you will do. And most of the time in India, lots of flexibility will be there, fortunately, So I just give this example, but of course, it's many things can be improved. I was in Varanasi a couple of weeks ago with differently able people, all in wheelchair. So can you imagine, they all wanted to go to the Ganga Aarti, but due to the Ghats, we had to have so many people to carry them because of the wheelchair. No access to the boats. Can you imagine? No access. So this should be done because many people in India, they want to go for pilgrimage. They want to go to Ganga Aarti. So before we think about, rafting or those things, many other things can be done easily. You agree?
So I totally agree with what you say, but one important aspect we need to keep in mind is this is an Indian attitude, which is not a very professional attitude. You say, we'll pick you up. We are accessible. We have just 2 stairs. We'll lift you. We are accessible. Everything is on the ground floor. So this is like, in India it works because disabled people really don't have a choice. But then if a person, this is not dignified, let me tell you, and if a person is coming from anywhere across the world, would never do that. So if a place is not accessible, like sometimes they have 200 kg wheelchair, you cannot do that. And it's not dignified again. It's like they live independently despite all their severe disabilities. Why would they want to be lifted? So we should get over this, like what is the dignified approach to an experience offering that we can offer to them? If a place is like, for example, in Varanasi, the Ganga Aarti, there is a ghat 30 kilometers away from Varanasi, which is possible, like it's easier, there's no stairs. So yeah, we did that too. But then you have to tell this to the traveler, this is what the reality is. Do you want to do it? The choice always has to be with them. Some people are okay, I don't have a choice, this is what I have to do, but I still want to have that experience, okay, I'm fine with being lifted. But some would say, no, I don't want to. So the choice always has to be at the disabled traveler's side, whether they want to do it or not. And of course, safety remains a concern in these cases. So.
As a tour leader, you have a duty of care. And it's really up to the tour leader to say whether a person on the tour can do an activity or can't do an activity. Because of the public liability insurance issues, ultimately the tour leader is responsible.
So you have to get this, that's why I said, in agreement with the traveler and get yourself signed off on anything that you're doing. So if we do rafting, we get the whole, get signed off that it's, and we get an adventure travel insurance again on our part. So yes, it is your responsibility, and it's for you to judge whether you are comfortable doing that or not as well, as much as the traveler is comfortable doing that.
The comfort comes from the legal procedures of having a public liability case against you. So it's whether the tour leader is willing to take that risk.
Yeah, it's on you, yeah. That's why we need accessible places. Like it depends upon the destination. I can share if people want. Sure.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Neha. Thank you. Thanks. Always an inspiration to hear you talk. And I heard you first about 15 years ago. 15? No. 12 years. When you spoke in Surya?
8 years ago.
No.
Planetable is 8 years old.
No, that time you had still not started. Planetable I heard after only.
So when did you hear me?
I heard you in Surya. Anyway,
Okay.
I judge everything by my age. Thank you, but it's been a long association, and thank you so much for spending this time. You're here, right? Yeah. So when people want to talk to you individually, yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks. So the next session. Apologies, we are slightly delayed. But you want to sit? No. Yeah, Gopi is talking, so we can. Yeah. So the next speaker is, I'm sure, again, he's prolific. He's invited and a much celebrated speaker everywhere. He does, I mean, we've been working with him, and it's a privilege to be promoting what he does under Petrico as the experiences company. One of the key takeaways for us where Gopi is concerned, and his company Petrico and the Blue Yonder, and whoever has gone and done his experience, and he'll speak more to you, is the hope that things can be done better on ground. So that's my big takeaway from Gopi already. But we've been working together for quite a long time. We've been talking about working together for, I think, for 7, 8 years. Finally, in the pandemic, we said, okay, we have to now, start working together and promoting each other. He also is promotes Rare very well and adequately to whichever markets he accesses. Gopi, over to you. Sorry to delay your talk here.
No worries.
I'm
not going to trouble your lunch. I will put it in 20 minutes. Okay, we can
No, lunch is on. Oh, yeah, okay. So do you clicker? Yeah, here. Yeah, here.
What's the clicker?
Yeah. No, that's the clicker's thing.
Yeah, that you put in your laptop.
Well, I was planning a 40-minute presentation, so I'm cutting down 20 minutes of it. So in between, in case you have any questions, don't wait for the last. You have any doubts, just intervene, okay? So that it doesn't become a download, but let's interact, okay? This is not working. Okay, it's fine. No problem. Let's save time. These are just some images from the trips that we run, basically to show you that travel happens everywhere. It happens in the mountain, it happens within the community, and it also happens in beautiful beaches like this. Can anyone guess which beach this is? So this is a beautiful beach called Pemba in Mozambique. In 2019, Time magazine had featured an entrepreneur, a female entrepreneur called Amy, to be top 100 influencers in tourism industry for setting up amazing initiatives which uplifted tens and thousands of people of poverty. And this photo was taken 2 days before the landfall of Cyclone Kenneth. And the challenge that I'm sure, like that day we called Amy, we spoke to her, like even till today, we are regularly in touch purely because she had set up a not-for-profit foundation to uplift the local communities, and she was using the power of tourism. But when something like this crazy cyclone Kenneth happened, which is in the history of Mozambique, the largest ever, I think 35 or 43 people died, about $350 million were the loss. Her biggest challenge was that she could see choppers going above her head. She could see flights going in, coming in with EU-supported funds NGOs, Oxfam GB, everybody coming in, but she couldn't get the support she was supposed to give to her people, the people with whom she was working. I'm sure at that time she would have thought, I wish I had the capacity, resources, and tools in my hand to make a difference. Now, this is the story some of you might know. In August 2018, we experienced a once in 100 years deluge. For a few days it was fun. By mid-August, incessant rain forced rivers to breach and mudslides from the mountains. Then came the flood. In Chendamangalam, the weaving community of more than 300 families saw their livelihoods washed away. Looms, properties, stock, drowned under the water up to 12 feet deep. Piles of stinking soil clothes lay strewn behind the weaving units and along the village road. Where most saw devastation, social entrepreneurs Lakshmi and Gopi saw opportunities. This is where the story of Chekutis began. Through crowdsourcing, 50,000 volunteers in 9 countries upcycled the ruined clothes into 120,000 plus Chekutis. 360 dolls out of each worthless sari. Selling the Chekutis raised the much needed funds for the weavers. They also captured the mood of the time. A beacon of resilience and solidarity shown by our people during the flood. This child from the village of Chendamangalam was someone we all could relate to. It had scars, it had stains. It didn't pretend another perfect world at all. It was us. They are used as gifts, decorations, luggage tags and lanyards, as workshop tool for children affected by trauma, as a memory to hold on to, as a reminder of the height we reached as a humanity. The Chekutis are still young, but they are growing, sharing new stories, stories of supporting the underprivileged with dignity, and telling the world that Kerala isn't just only God's own country. It's also a land of Chekutis. Because this isn't just a story of one village, it's the beginning of 35 million stories, all from one place. So this, from all the way to Pempa, to the small state where I am from, Kerala, here the loss to the destination because of that flood was 48,000 crores, which is $5 billion US. Now imagine if you are a tour operator sitting in London or San Francisco or here in Delhi. If you know a destination is constantly, frequently being ravaged by floods or any climate change related incidents, how many of you would say, that's okay, that's fine, I'll still send my traveler? So when a disaster happens in a destination, it's not only the local communities that are affected, it's not only the local tour operators, small guys like us who are affected, it's also affecting the source market. Imagine if there are travel companies like in UK with their branding related to Kerala. They sell destinations, they promote destinations with the name Kerala. And if you are constantly hearing this news, that it's affected, you are going to think twice, multiple times, do I want to send my traveler there? So this is where the need for building what I personally call as a co-creating climate resilient destinations. And how is that possible? Is it possible at all? I don't know. We'll talk about that. And many of you might have probably in the past few weeks seen this image. This is from Ladakh. And this whole 21 days of fasting was, how the media was showing was more about Ladakh to get the statehood. But the real story was, it's their fight to make sure that they hold on to whatever little is left. And in that, it's a 20-minute, there's a beautiful speech, you should actually listen to it, but I'll just summarize it. One of the biggest point was that when Sonam was talking about this whole, the need for Ladakh to come together, what he was requesting to people like us living in Delhi or Kochi or in the urban cities of the world was that please be very mindful about how you consume and how you live. Because the glacier that is melting in Ladakh has a direct connection to how we live, as well as the other way around. If the glaciers are melting, it's affecting people in my village in Kerala. I don't know if you would believe this little video that I'm going to show you. I'm skipping this. That's where I live, Kochi. How the media portrays the Kochi, most of the tour operators also would know Kochi like this. But the Kochi that I see literally on a day-to-day basis is this.
ബഹുമാനപ്പെട്ട കളക്ടർ സാർ അറിയുവാൻ, ഞങ്ങളുടെ നാട്ടിലെയും എൻ്റെ വീട്ടിലെയും കാര്യങ്ങൾ ഓർമ്മിപ്പിക്കാനാണ് ഈ എഴുത്ത്. ഇപ്പോൾ കുറേ കൊല്ലമായിട്ട് ഉപ്പുവെള്ളമാണ് ഞങ്ങളുടെയൊക്കെ വീടിൻ്റെ ചുറ്റിലും. വീടൊക്കെ കേടായി. എൻ്റെ കൂട്ടുകാർ ആദിത്യൻ്റെയും അതുലിൻ്റെയും പിന്നെ ആര്യയുടെയും വീട്ടിൽ 2011 ഓരുവെള്ളം കയറാൻ തുടങ്ങിയതാ. 13 കൊല്ലമായിട്ട് അവർ ഇങ്ങനെ ജീവിക്കണേ. 15 മിനിറ്റ് വെള്ളത്തിൽ കൂടി നടന്നിട്ടാ സ്കൂളിൽ പോണേ. കാലാവസ്ഥ മാറ്റാന്നാ പറയണേ. കുറെ വീടും പോയി, ആൾക്കാർക്ക് ജോലിയും പോയി. നാരായണൻ ചേട്ടനൊക്കെ എത്ര മീൻ കിട്ടിയിരുന്നതാ, ഇപ്പൊ ഒന്നുമില്ല, തൂക്കുപണി മാത്രമേ. ഇവിടുത്തെ മെമ്പറൊക്കെ പലതും ശ്രമിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്, പക്ഷെ ഒറ്റയ്ക്ക് എന്താവാനാ. ഞങ്ങളുടെ വാർഡിൽ കഴിഞ്ഞ 4 വർഷം ഏതു ദിവസം എത്ര മഴ പെയ്തു എന്ന് കൃത്യം ഡാറ്റ കയ്യിലുള്ള കുട്ടിയുണ്ട്. ഇങ്ങനെ നോക്കുമ്പോൾ മഴയുടെ പാറ്റേൺ മനസ്സിലാക്കാൻ പറ്റും. നമ്മുടെ പ്രശ്നത്തിൻ്റെ കൃത്യം വിവരങ്ങളുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ പരിഹാരം ഉണ്ടാക്കാൻ പറ്റില്ലേ? ഇത് മുരുകേശൻ ചേട്ടൻ ലക്ഷക്കണക്കിന് കണ്ടൽ നട്ടിട്ടുണ്ട്. ആൾക്കിത് ചെയ്തിട്ട് എന്താ ലാഭം? ആള് ചെയ്യുന്നതിൻ്റെ ഗുണം ഞങ്ങൾ കുട്ടികൾക്കാണ്. കാലാവസ്ഥാ വ്യതിയാനത്തെ അതിജീവിക്കാൻ പറ്റുന്ന കേരളത്തിൻ്റെ സ്വന്തം അരിയാണ് പൊക്കാളി. അത് ഇവിടെ കൃഷി ചെയ്യാൻ ആളില്ല. എന്നാൽ വിച്ചപ്പൻ ചേട്ടൻ 12 ഏക്കറിൽ എല്ലാ കൊല്ലവും പൊക്കാളി വിളവെടുക്കും. ഇങ്ങനത്തെ വലിയ കാര്യങ്ങൾ ചെയ്യുന്ന ആളുകളെ നമ്മൾ വഴികാട്ടികളാക്കേണ്ടേ. സസ്നേഹം, ദേവനന്ദൻ.
When we were shooting this, the biggest challenge that we had was how the hell are we going to shoot this without making it look like a brochure of Kerala? Anybody knowing Kerala, it's like if you follow the Instagram reels, you will actually see many of these shots, beautiful islands, like, hamlets. it's not at all beautiful for the people living there. You know, the water that you saw, this was not shot during monsoon. This was shot actually in a summer. And the water that you see, it's actually seawater. Sea had entered these coastal villages in 2011 and it didn't go back. So imagine the scenario. You wake up every day morning, like you sleep, and then you wake up, and when you put your foot on the floor, there's 1 inch of water. And if it's only for an hour, it's all right. Imagine 365 days. Those kids, we didn't plan the story. We heard about them, we went there and we shot. These kids go to school every single day, 15 minutes, one way, 15 minutes. The extra bag they carry is actually another extra clothes, which they change in public. Imagine the trauma of girls who are going to school every day. So we can talk about so many things. We can talk about sustainable tourism. We can talk about responsible tourism, all kind of stuff. But this is gross climate injustice. Now, when you look at, like, you know, when I go to Europe, I'm invited to sit on so many panels. I'm advising different organizations, agencies. White, European, North, you know, the panels are like that. You go to WTM, you will see 16 people sitting in a panel talking about our lives, the global South. They would not even take an initiative to invite somebody, a female scientist from India or Kenya or Sri Lanka to sit there, and because they are bloody hell discussing our life. So this narrative that is designed and devised all around, somewhere, many places they are talking about the need for building resilience. And these people, they have crossed all that. This is about climate change adaptability. You know, like when we invited the cinematographers to come and work with us, the budget was just going above whatever we had in our mind. But the moment they went there into these houses, they said, sorry, Gopi, there's no way we can charge you for this. Because they felt so guilty because they live in Kochi, which is not even 20 minutes away from Fort Kochi. And they didn't know that such people live. And we are talking about, like in my business, we personally know at least 20,000 houses like this. Just in Kochi. Now, in that Ladakh fasting discussions, Sonam is constantly talking about how Ladakhis are going to be climate refugees. We have them long way back in Kerala. Not small numbers, 50,000, 60,000 families have left areas of the backwaters. You know, backwaters is such a stunning, visually stunning places. Like I always joke, like I always tell the Kerala tourism, friends in Kerala tourism, if at all I have anybody remaining now, that in the past 20 years ago, the Kerala tourism advertisements about houseboats, the nightlife, it was so stunning because there will be just one houseboat in like 2 square kilometers in the middle of the night, little lamps on it, lanterns on it, and they would proudly say, this is our nightlife, slow traffic. The same thing is going to happen soon. It will be slow traffic. There will be, but the image that you're going to see is very eerie because you're going to see empty houses because people are vacating. Now this is the reality that is happening. But at the same time, it's not really all that terrible. This is one question that a lot of people ask us. Like, I was part of this TPCC, tourism panel on climate change. During the Glasgow Declaration or even the Egypt conference, you know, they put together some findings about what is happening, especially in the backdrop of Glasgow Declaration or, you know, when tourism declares climate crisis. You know, we were one of the first 5 or 6 companies that signed up for that, knowing very much about what we are getting into it, because at least somewhere you have to start acknowledging that tourism industry has to acknowledge that there is a crisis. A lot of us don't realize it because it's not touching our life. We are so privileged. I am so bloody privileged. But that's not the case with people living down there, especially in even a small state like Kerala with $5 billion, that is roughly about 10 to 14% of our GDP, depending on tourism. When disaster happens, it affects communities and it affects the destination. And when it affects destination, it affects tourism industry. And this is the case globally. Earlier, when we used to talk about climate change, it was so difficult to convince, get attention of somebody. But now, it's so easy to talk to a German. It's so easy for me to talk to a New Yorker, because the New Yorker can't actually move in the subway because there's constant flash floods. You can't walk through Washington, D.C. without really, getting your feet wet in many places, because similar to the tidal flooding that I just showed you in that video is happening in DC, in many places. So the communication is happening. So now there's a genuine interest that I'm seeing from the Western world, Western tour operators, Indian tour operators asking, what is it that we can do? So again, do I have solutions for everything? No. But what we try to do is, I will just show you one small initiative, couple of initiatives, since we are running out of time. Like the other day, I was on a small panel with Travel Foundation, where the discussion was about 700, 800 people have signed the Glasgow Declaration, but a lot of people, they have signed it, they have acknowledged, but the next steps, what do we do? This is a big question. And it's not even about lack of money. Many tour operators, they actually personally called us and said, we are ready to commit 1% of our turnover. These are $1 million companies. So people are ready to spend money, but they are very hesitant. Where is my money going? Such questions are coming. So there are discussions about, can we, start, similar to the various certifications that are happening around the world right now, people are talking about, can we do a vulnerability assessment? This morning we heard about millions and millions of dollars investing into building hotels. Now, we often get approached by companies who want to move into sustainability space, asking, can you be our consultant, because we want to build a sustainable hotel, 100-key hotels in North Kerala. And then we ask them, what's your budget? And they would very clearly say, as long as there is an ROI, budget is not an issue. Even such people, when they come, because sustainability is such a fancy word, and then my personal opinion is the moment you start, the human intervention starts, it's no longer sustainable. It's an aspiration. Being responsible is one way to move there, to reach there. And so, to such people, what we are telling them is very simple things, like it's important to start with doing a climate vulnerability assessment. Like the village where I live, where one of our friends' property, Kranganur, is there. Ever since Kranganur came, a lot of people have started coming in there with an interest to invest in that place. But nobody is aware of the fact that the saline water is actually entering everybody's walls. It's covering, it's creeping all the way up there. So if you're spending $80 million into investment into a place, at least spend $100,000 to do a basic vulnerability assessment to see, because it's all about ROI. So all those stuff. So we put together a small not-for-profit foundation called Resilient Destination Foundation soon after the pandemic. And in our foundation, we've got a climatologist, we've got a hydrologist, we've got a behavioral energy expert, and I come with a disaster management and tourism background in it. And one thing that we conceived is that it is important that in the future, whatever you do in culture, whatever you do in terms of building properties, you create economic livelihood opportunities for communities. All you need is one flash flood. That's all gone. So how do you prepare communities? Because by the time the communication comes from top down, all the way from the government here in Delhi, all the way down to Kerala or to Ladakh, to multiple places, it's a bit too slow. By the time another flood would have gone through the system. This is what we are facing. So is it possible to build community-based early warning forecasting system? This is something that we've been working on. A couple of months ago, our partner Equinoct actually won the UNICEF Innovation Award for building the early warning forecasting system. So this, the whole idea of the CRD, as we call it, is that in the future, any tourism development, we hear a lot about the climate action in tourism. And this is about changing the LED lights, this is about, changing the linens. Unfortunately, we are still stuck in this old stuff. I'm not saying those are not bad, but the thing is, we have to think beyond that, beyond the hotel, beyond the tourism industry, beyond the particular tour operator, but start thinking about the destination. And that destination, I'm not talking from the perspective of a tourism destination, but a destination where people live. If the community is affected, you're going to be out of the business sooner or later. Like that islands that I showed you in that video, those are just like 20, 25 minutes away from Fort Kochi. So imagine the scenario. You build a structure like this, and every day morning, half an inch of water enters your reception or your bedroom. And the next day, TripAdvisor review is going to be, I spent $300 to stay at your property, but I could not even take a dump because the toilet system is all broken because the tidal flooding has ended. This is the ground reality that is happening. So we can't, sitting here in India, in the global south, saying that, the West has gone through all the industrial revolution, they have had the comfort, they have made the money, so now it's our turn that we have to go through this whole process. No. It is high time that we also be very cautious and take decisions in such a way that we need to decarbonize in a way, unbelievable way we have to decarbonize. So how can tour operators do this? So it is actually possible, quite like my business, 80% of the business before pandemic was European travelers or American travelers. Post-pandemic, immediately, it was so surprising, 96% of my travelers were Indian travelers last year. But now it's again back. European travelers are traveling, but the trend that I'm seeing is in our business is that people are staying longer. Swedish travelers are traveling 36 days with us. The max this year was 42 days. Families traveling for 42 days, but telling, we will not be coming for another 10 years. So such conscious decisions, I don't know how many people can afford such travel. So if your dependency is on inbound travel, we need to look at all these things. So another thing that we have started doing is to quantify. Because unless and otherwise I quantify my emission, there is no way I can address the issue. However small, it is actually possible, with interns, with some guys with MSc in environmental science. We are putting together a team now. Every single trip we just started documenting. But again, within the team, the discussion is about what do you do about the flights? That is beyond, but you calculate that as well. But then what you do is, at least what we are doing is, I'll just finish this in 3 minutes. For the traveler, this is a beautiful dining experience. But for us, this was a project that we conceived as a climate change adaptability project. The idea was that because of climate change, what's happening in and around Cochin is that the sea level water is rising. The temperature difference that you see in the sea is now reflected in our backwaters. The fish diversity has gone down tremendously. The fish count has gone down tremendously. So in many cases, even those who own Chinese fishing net are not even earning 100 rupees a week. That's crazy. Kerala is a place where your average daily wage is 1,000 rupees. But this is the life that's going on. So we were looking at this, how can you convert this crisis into an opportunity where you can bring in livelihood with dignity? So rather than launching large projects, like, telling like, okay, we need to do something on decarbonization, what we started doing is that, let's pick up what is possible for us as a small tour operator. Look at the crisis that is around your area and see how you can convert your platform, which is your business, into a solution where you can actually bring in climate change adaptability, sometimes climate resilience. In this case, like, we are even training the fishermen and the farmers to be first responders, so that in the future, when another crisis happens, they know what to do. And this is how in 2018, like, it did not even take 30 minutes for our team to put together our resources and tools, to the extent that, like, in the first 24 hours, we managed to rescue about 4,500 people. Of course, we worked with the government, with the local police, and we even had operators sitting here in Delhi sending us dinghies, sending us, like, rescue stuff. That's the power of tourism industry. Now, in terms of again, another one, like a mangrove. We got about 200 plus activities that we have created now focusing on climate resilience. Because unless and otherwise, local tour operators or DMCs, we do things hand in hand, we are not going to find any solution. So rather than just thinking about, oh, yeah, I'm not an NGO, I'm not into CSR funding, what tour operators can do is to actually create beautiful experiences, which brings in money into the community, which also makes sure that there are climate change adaptability in each. It is all possible. We just need to think slightly out of the box. No rocket science. You don't need to be an environmental scientist to do what we are doing. It's just to understand what is going on there. But at the many times what happens is, for a lot of tour operators, they don't, or we don't have the core competency to do something like that. That's where we partner with guys who are already doing it. Like, if Global Himalayan Expedition is doing kick-ass work in the Himalayas, partner with them. But then our industry is so insecure, especially our DMCs are so insecure, they are so scared of partnering with people. The moment they partner, they're like, oh my God, my business from Europe is going to be taken away by this guy. I face this all the time. But then, I don't know how to overcome that, but what we should all do is to partner, collaborate, because there won't be any destinations in the future, if we are not working together. So to conclude, to highlight this small work that we are doing, last ITB Berlin, we announced that we are going to launch a platform called Kaita. Now, Kaita is an aspiring platform. Hopefully by 2025, we'll be able to launch it globally. We need shitloads of money to do that. The idea is to bring together the humanitarian sector and the tourism sector on a common platform, so that in the future, when a disaster happens, whether it's Nairobi or Kathmandu or some places, anywhere in the world, we should be able to kickstart. We should be able to open up the resources in such a way that hoteliers who have committed their rooms, because during a crisis, the humanitarian sector, whatever they need, there are about 4 or 5 key things that they need to activate the response, which are shelter, accommodation. They need food and beverage with dignity. They will need access to logistics, supply chain, vehicles, everything. They need all these things. And highly skilled human resources. And the ability to raise funds, because there is an emotional connect to destination. Tell me one sector in the world that is sitting with all these things unutilized. That's our $9 trillion tourism industry. Why can't we repurpose our industry smartly and creatively so that we can actually, create a destination that are resilient? So if we don't have the core competency, we can bring in the humanitarian sector and use our resources. And the other way around. Imagine training 1,000 taxi drivers in Delhi. How much is it going to cost for tour operators like us to train that many taxi drivers? Imagine how many million taxi drivers are in India. So we can't always expect for the government to come in all the time. They are also getting tired because of resources constraint. They don't have enough money, they don't have enough people. But we are a $9 trillion industry, which I think we have a lot of commitment. And this is not about charity. I'm not asking anybody to give your 2% to something like this, but rather it's about investing in our own survival. Because if there is no destination, if there is no community, there's no tourism. Thank you. we can talk during the lunch. I don't want to take you guys away from your lunch. Thank you. Sorry? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Peggy, Nina, Shobha, yeah, they've all been to that little video. Oh, yeah, of course, we've got two. Oh, my God, these guys. Can you guys please stand up just for 1 second? So, Neeta and Ashu, without knowing what they were doing, they were actually the first tour operators to bring about 20 Australian and New Zealand tour operators immediately after the Kerala flood. And when a lot of people were canceling, they took a decision that they're going to convince their travelers because of the positive stories that were coming from the destination. This is, again, something so crucial. Now you may sit, but thank you. It's so crucial that, because this is not a one-off event. Earlier when this flood happened in Kerala, everybody was talking about it's once in 100-year stuff. But we were actually preparing for this flood for 8 years. Actually, there is a podcast called 6 Years and a Flood, based on what one of the Panchayat secretary told us. After the flood, he called me and said, Gopi, it took 6 years and a flood for us to understand what the hell you're talking about. Then my only request was that don't wait another 6 years and another flood to learn more, because, so during that time, if you know that these guys in Kerala or in Ladakh or in Nairobi, they are taking care of the people and the destination is actually compassionate to understand what is going on and taking positive steps to counter it and overcome it, it will also instill confidence among our FTOs, like what these two wonderful people did actually for us. Thank you. We've got lots of little dolls there. You're welcome to pick it up.